All right. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to this session about climate depression. We will start with a story of mine. When I was a child, my life was full of small existential fears. That I would lose my mom in the supermarket, that my parents would separate, that I would accidentally squish a bug when I walked through the garden. And I remember the time that my dad told me at some point in the future, maybe some 7 or 8 billion years in the future, the sun is going to implode and destroy our entire solar system. I didn't sleep very well after that, or the night after that. And as an adult, we may have very different fears, but they may get to us in the same fundamental way. So today we will explore what it means to be depressed or anxious about climate change and how one might soldier on in the face of it. My name is Aafke Fraaien. I am your moderator today, and this is the second session in a series of 5 about climate grief organized by the Studium Generale. I have 2 organizational questions before we start. One is, this topic of course deserves your full attention, so please remember to put your phone on silence. And my second question is about photography. We have a photographer today here with us. She makes pictures for the website and the social media channels of Studium Generale. And is there anyone who doesn't want to be photographed? Please raise your hand. It's really not a problem to be taken, to take pictures where you're not on it, or at least your face is not visible. Photographer, where are you? Yes, did you see? Okay, great. Thanks. All right, now before we get started, let's first have a look and see who's in the room today. So can I see hands from the people who are students at the TU Delft? All right, can I ask you what brings you here today? Do you want to? Oh, sorry, I'm going to.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, I feel like sustainability and climate is a very important part of these life these days, and this I feel is the attitude that I have towards the climate these days. I feel quite depressed about it. I feel quite pessimistic about it, and yeah, I was wondering if I, through this event, could find some insights, new insights that I could find, perhaps some hope, perhaps some way to combat this feeling of being generally quite down about the whole topic.
Thank you for sharing that. Beautiful, I think, and a very good reason to be here today. I hope this session will be therapeutic. Other students who want to share, who maybe have very similar or very different reasons. Maybe someone from this side, you're also studying. Do you want to share?
It's a bit because I'm on a streak, because I was here last time as well.
Very good.
And probably it's quite the same as earlier. I hope to get some new insights on maybe how to cope or how other people feel about it. Yeah.
Are you saying, so you also feel fairly depressed about it?
It feels like a heavy topic, but I'm not. I do have a lot of hope. I think we're going in the right direction. So yeah.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for the nuance. Very good. Can I see hands from people who are employees at the TU Delft? We have several here. Can someone of you share what brings you here today? Maybe from you. Do you want to share?
So I was also here last time, so I want to keep it up. And it was a good event last time. So. And I work with clouds, and there's a climate connection. So also from work, I'm interested, and I do feel the grief. So
you do feel the grief personally, but you're also involved as an employee on this topic, and that's why you're here. Thanks. Anyone else who has come here for a very different reason?
Good afternoon, my name is Mara. I work for the Integrity Office here at TU Delft, and I was here last time as well. I enjoyed it very much, learned a lot, so I hope to learn again a lot today. At the Integrity Office, together with the Climate Action Program, we're organizing dialogues on collaboration with the fossil fuel industry. So that's a very specific reason why I'm here, to listen and learn and get more insights that we can use there in those initiatives. But also, in addition to being an employee at TU Delft, I'm also a mother of 2 sons, 17 and 20 years old. And I worry about them and about their friends. And the youngest is a fierce climate activist, and he does suffer from depression at times related to climate issues. So that's a very personal reason for being here.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. So you're saying it's job related, but it's also personal, and you're here for your sons, especially the youngest one. All right, thank you. Another employee who wants to share? Was maybe a very different reason. Okay. Is there anyone who didn't raise their hand yet? Yeah? Can I ask you why you're here?
Yeah, I want to have more knowledge so I can transfer it to young people. I'm living next to a high school and everybody throw everything on the streets. And my purpose is to give them some lessons about it. It's their future. And I think you get depressed when you do nothing. When you get in action, you're not depressed because then you go for it.
All right, so you're saying you hope to learn how to educate others to become more active, because that's the only antidote against depression.
And as a child, I was already really into climate things. And I had nice discussions with my father why a Kiwi come from New Zealand with a plane, because we like it here. So I was always like that.
So your concerns for the environment go way back. Yeah. Thanks. Anyone else who is not an employee or a student here, but is here anyways? I think you also raised your hand. Do you want to share?
Yes, actually the same thing as anyone here. I live also here at the corner, so and I worked at Technical University, so it's also interesting to see a multidisciplinary view. I think that's very interesting. How and yeah, the grief. I also agree with that. Sometimes you get in a depression. What are we doing? And do we have the power to change things? And then, yeah, I think that's something which I'm looking also here. And next to that, I'm a member of the political organization here, GroenLinks. So, yeah, that's also interesting, of course.
Yeah, all right. So I hear you also say it's interesting that for this event they always bring different disciplines together, and you're also here because you're part of a green movement, let's say. Yeah, all right. Thank you very much. All right. I'm going to ask you to turn to your neighbor and discuss with your neighbor what emotions climate change raises in you. That's my question. Please discuss with your neighbor. What emotions does climate change raise in you? All right, I see some very lively conversation. Very good. All right, I'm very curious what emotions are raised in you. Very good conversation. Yeah, very involved, very engaged, very good. So who discussed any positive emotions that are raised within them on this topic? Any positive emotions? Yeah? Do you want to say more about it?
Well, we discussed hope. That's because every time you go to a demonstration or you talk to other people about it, you sense that a lot of other people are worried as well, and that a lot of people are taking action already.
And that's what creates hope for you. That gives you hope. Very nice, thanks. Any other positive emotions discussed? Maybe unlikely at an event about climate grief. So, any negative emotions that you discussed? Do you want to share any of them? Very difficult. Yeah.
The climate change. I mean, there is if you see the rich West and the East, and people are suffering because of our how do you say that?
Our actions here affect them there.
Injustice. So people are suffering, are not having food, drink.
And what emotions does that raise in you?
Yeah, a little bit of anger because we're not taking responsibility, and people are not aware, not enough aware of their actions here in the rich West.
So the inaction and the ignorance are make you angry, yeah?
Yeah. Still people not admitting or acknowledging that there's something going on. So I don't know the exact word in English, but I think, that's just incredible. You cannot believe. Yeah.
That people don't own up to it, to the situation. That makes you angry. All right. So we have anger. Did others also discuss anger? Can you raise your hand if you discussed anger? Yeah, we have several couples who discussed anger. Any other emotions that you discussed? I saw you two also having a lively conversation. Do you want to share?
Well, I'm very sorry, but I don't know. We discussed in Dutch, and I don't know the English word. But my dominant emotion, I think, is onbegrip. I don't understand why it is so necessary, for instance, to get to net zero. I don't understand why it is necessary, for instance, to cut all ties with fossil fuels. And, well, so that's, I think, the dominant emotion I feel. It isn't clear to me that it's all that bad. And then, given that it isn't clear to me that it's all that bad, it also isn't clear to me that there is a necessity to protest everything.
And how does it make you feel that people protest everything and make it seem like it's so bad?
Well, that makes me maybe a bit frustrated sometimes.
And do I also hear you say, correct me if I'm wrong, did you kind of feel maybe drawn into something or like attacked or not attacked, but kind of involved in something that people are telling you that you do something wrong and you're like...
It's like, okay, I'm orienting a bit to no, but I would say that, well, maybe they could prove something more.
It's a bit strange that people seem so to agree with each other and you're like, hey, but wait, where's the evidence? Yeah. All right, thanks. Yeah, so frustration, that's the emotion I hear here. Do other people recognize the emotion of... yeah, what's that in English? Misunderstanding, but that's not understanding. Not understanding. All right, any other emotions that you discussed? I want to hear from one more couple. Yeah?
We also discussed like how it makes you feel powerless when you see what's happening all around the world, especially like related to extreme weather events. Yeah, and that it's also like there's so much, because we both work in climate change, so there's so much information you receive all the time, it also makes you feel numb to a certain extent.
Yeah, so talking about what emotions does it raise, at some point, no emotions, yeah? You become numb with all the information and all the heaviness. All right. Okay, well, I think with that we've... Oh, is anyone, did others also discuss this numbness? I should ask, yeah? All right, so it is sort of recognized. So we hear from each other that climate change affects us emotionally in different ways, and today we talk about the negative emotions mostly. And this brings us to the goal of today's session, which is to explore these difficult emotions, especially depression and anxiety around climate change, and also to see what is necessary to achieve real hope in this situation. And today we have 3 speakers to help us, to guide us through this. And they're not just speakers today, but they want to exchange in conversation with you. And the first speaker will help us understand what is it that makes us so depressed about climate anyways? And what role does the media have in this? Can we create more hopeful stories? She's a professor in journalism and innovation at Fontys University of Applied Sciences. And please welcome Danielle Arets.
Now I'm on, right? Thank you. Thanks for the introduction. I'm not sure whether I can give you an antidote, to be perfectly honest. And I'm not sure whether I will talk dominantly about depression and journalism, because I'm an optimist myself, but I feel a lot of anger. So I try to balance this story. And if you feel it's not the right balance, then interrupt me and I'll see if I can pull on another trick. I work in journalism at Fontys School of University of Applied Sciences, and we have a team of 15 people. That is a group partly designers, partly AI engineers, and partly journalism researchers. So it is kind of an interdisciplinary team, and why this combination is important, I will show you with a couple of projects that I think will highlight this topic in an interesting way. The first one is a 4-dimensional newsroom that we created. Why is that? Because we thought it's fun. But moreover, because we feel that we can't really get a grip of time. So time as, well, an important element in journalism is not really considered when we do journalism research, but also when we talk about big events. It's always happening now. It's always immediate. And the day after, we talk about the new now. So it's always very focused on that specific moment, which is not really good if we want to talk about discussions like, or the really complicated, wicked issues like climate change, where you need to have historical knowledge. So what we try to do is to create a timeline and to give you a bit of an example, and I make a little excursion now. You probably know the famous quote of Angela Merkel. Does anyone still recall? Famous, you're nodding. What was that? Wir schaffen das. And do you still recall what she meant by that?
Housing of refugees from, I believe, Syria in 2015.
Good memory, thanks. And what did she mean by we? Who was we?
I believe the European Union.
Really good, yeah. And das? But not specifically Syria. It was more in general. So it was really a cry out to Europe, we, Europeans, can handle this. But that message changed radically over time. Obviously, because her regime was critiqued, we have different sentiments regarding this issue, more refugees coming in. So at the end of, well, almost her political period, it became we, Europeans, we Germans, hardly can deal with the Syrian refugees. So it was really a different kind of message. And that happens with each and every debate. It either erodes, it evolves, it gets different connotations. And you can do this kind of research, but it takes an awful lot of time. We do that as journalists, but it is, well, it's a lot of manual labor so far, but our AI engineers can be really helpful. So what we did, and there is where the climate change comes in, we created a tool that we called Newslider, and we used an immense archive for that. It's the News Archive. It's the largest archive actually in Europe. It's called Media Suite. Please use it. You can utilize it for any project because it's, well, it's really well maintained, and you can search almost every episode. So your favorite episodes of almost every news item will be in it. And what we did using this tool, as well as our knowledge of AI, we tried to map the debate on climate change over the years, starting in the 80s. And what you will see is what we did actually using a technique that is called named entity linking. It's an AI term used to do sort of word webs where you associate with this term of climate change. You can also associate with the ozone layer, acid rain, emission rights, all these terms that, well, frequently pop up in a debate. And then we mapped it over time. And we did a sentiment analysis as well as looking at dominant iconic images that had an impact on that debate. And maybe you can already see some interesting data popping up. Anything you can, well, it's not a very clear diagram, I have to admit that, but maybe you can see that when we discussed ozone rain, acid rain, sorry, in the 80s, it was quite heavy debate. You can see it was pretty polarized, but it was a really engaging debate. And the same you can see happening when we discussed the ozone layer. Both debates were at least really engaging and people felt alarmed by it. Whereas if you now look at emission rights or ecology, you see that there is hardly any movement. And I see you nodding. Why do you think that that is? Now making an awful noise. Oh, that's my hair, sorry. Yeah. Why do you think that is, that the debate now is not so engaging anymore? It still is, obviously. There is a lot of debate on climate change, but when we look at specifically acid rain and the ozone layer, yeah, well, that's a really good one. I will repeat that because you probably couldn't hear it, but there wasn't that much knowledge yet, you mentioned, and there is always this sort of cognitive bias that we forget about these developments in the past, which is definitely true, but what we try to figure out is whether there is also a relation, and I don't have the answer yet, so that is a bit disappointing, but when, as a kid, we talked about acid rain, I thought I could actually taste it. I remember walking around and tasting the rain. I said, oh, is this really sour? So it is a very sensible and understandable language. And the same with this, you're smiling, you recognize this, right? Or I'm just a weird kid. Yeah, that's definitely true. The same actually for this ozone layer. I thought I could actually see it. So it's something you can imagine, which is really difficult talking about emission rights. What the hell are we talking about? Can we sense that? Can we smell that, experience that? And we have at least the impression that this sensory language could definitely help us to move forward, help us maybe to get out of this depression and see if we can have more positive framing towards these developments, something that we can imagine and that we can take action, because then we feel also alarmed that there is something you can do. We can just make sure that the rain smells good or tastes well again, or that we just, well, dig the hole. Something like we can fix this. And that's not happening with the vocabulary we're using right now. So this is one of the examples we're currently looking at. We actually build this installation also physically. And the reason I'm showing you that is that we try to do that with every research project we do. We create tangible interfaces. I'm really happy there is a project presented by you later on, that there is something tangible in the room, because that is so helpful in all the discussions that we're having currently, because all the discussions are so complex and so much based on language, whereas these emotions, the things that we don't take for granted and feel uncomfortable with, sometimes it's easier not to talk about it, but just to experience it or to smell and see. And I think you do a really wonderful job with that, to, well, to hear it and have it resonate, some bodily experiences. So this installation was really helpful for that, because we presented this in a couple of museums and asked people how this language affects them. And we got some really useful data out of this, but this is an ongoing research, so I don't have the answers yet, so it's still an assumption. What we do know, however, and that's the next project I present you, is that we see that in journalism there's quite some work to do when it comes to, representing climate change, especially when we look at the images. There is a research by a couple of professors of Exeter University that looked at how specifically these heat waves were presented in large media outlets. And always we see these happy pictures with people playing on the beach or enjoying themselves, doing leisure activities. I say always, but that especially is happening in the Netherlands and the UK. In France and Germany, they have more serious pictures and also sometimes very depressive or alarming pictures. Well, there's definitely work to do there, because what we see with these kind of images, that people feel like, okay, it's not that alarming yet. We can still play, we can still go to the beach, so what's to worry? So there's a lot of work to do in just looking at the image databases. That's precisely what we're doing at the moment, looking at the large image databases and see what kind of tags they use with the images to see if we can change that. Because it's not that journalists are stupid or they don't want to have a good picture with their story. It's sometimes also they have to work in a very, very fast tempo, and then they just pull up an image that relates with these specific tags and specific articles or headlines. So there's work to do there, and it's not really difficult to solve that. However, the question then comes up whether these alarming pictures will help us, because as some of you already mentioned, well, if you're depressed already, seeing these pictures that don't give you any perspective, is that the answer? We're not sure yet. We're figuring that out, but what we do know is that these pictures that are very alarming, this was a project of a student of mine, I'm also involved at the Design Academy in Eindhoven. This was a graduation project that was used quite a lot, this picture. It's, well, time is burning, time is ticking, and it's, well, literally an alarm clock. This kind of image, it definitely does the job in mentioning that it is a serious issue we should discuss, but people feel not really engaged. They feel like it's a lost cause. So these kind of images might not be the best answer. What we do believe, and what we also see from quite a lot of research in this field, is that speculative images and also sci-fi, so science fiction based on climate change, could perhaps be an answer to this. This is also a project from Design Academy students with TUE students, University of Technology in Eindhoven, who created a hibernation park. Looks nice, doesn't it? Looks like your next holiday is already there. So it's a Center Parks experience, but there you go on hibernation to actually solve the issue, because if we all go temporary on hibernation, well, then we definitely reduce CO2. So it's a nice way to instigate a different debate. And these kind of projects, and we tested it at Dutch Design Week 2 years ago, but also at a lot of academic events, we see that these kind of stories, speculative stories, as well as sci-fi novels, do a really good job in first, well, helping people to imagine a different future. So there is the answer to come out of the depression, to see if there is an alternative future even imaginable. But what these kind of pictures and also stories could do is to help you also imagine that this is not a story of you in relation to all these developments, but that it is also definitely needed to think of the political, economical, and even, well, philosophical structures that are involved in this. And that's sometimes really difficult if you're stuck within a political system when elections come up and you go protesting, you see, well, sometimes you achieve stuff, sometimes you don't. There's not a lot of progress going on, but what these sci-fi stories could do, at least that is what a lot of research is now mentioning, is that they could offer you alternative visions on also this interconnectedness between climate change, a new political climate, and new social structure. So that is precisely actually what we're experimenting, if we could do that in journalism. And I think my time is up, my time is burning. So I'll leave it with that, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Danielle. Give her a round of applause.
That's mine, right?
So indeed, I saw some people smiling and laughing at this hibernation picture. What do you think? Is this climate fiction, these speculative images, are they a good way to help our journalism about climate change?
I have, I think, a very, very obvious question. Is this still journalism?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think it is, personally, because we see that this kind of speculative journalism is still in a very pioneering phase, but I think this is definitely needed to come up with the new narrative. other people will definitely question this, but this is the way that we try to experiment, to see if this kind of language, what can we learn from these science fiction writers, what can we learn from designers in order to come up with a narrative that definitely helps to get out of a polarized debate. But you could definitely question that.
Can I ask you why not?
Well, you know, journalism, the classic definition of journalism is being objective and things like that. And this is about the kind of framing, you know, to try to prime the brain in a different way, to come up with alternative stories. It's more political, you would say, than the classical definition of journalism would imply.
Yeah, there is a lot of discussion going on activism in journalism, or whether that's even a possibility. And I think it's also a sort of false dichotomy, because the facts are there. The reason that we have a fierce debate and that people feel uncomfortable is the fact that we can't really express our emotions. I really liked your comment at the start that you say, well, I'm not even sure if there is enough evidence, but then you also express, well, I feel uncomfortable. And I would love to hear what makes you feel, what makes that feeling, and what do you need? And that question is, I think, a question that we should ask ourselves as journalists, to see what you guys would need, what kind of stories would be helpful, because just simply presenting the facts is not enough. So,
I think journalism is broad, and you have journalism is broad, and it depends on the audience or the readers.
For sure, yeah.
When you talk to school kids, you talk different. The message has to come over. When you talk to scientists, it's different. So I think every audience has his own, needs his own
yeah, its own approach. There, and are you also asking, like, for what target group would this work best?
People who like to travel and like new things, innovators.
That's who you think this particular one would work for? Do you want to respond to that?
I don't want to offend somebody, but Telegraaf readers are different than the financial paper.
Yeah, and on the other hand, maybe I think we for years didn't take our audiences serious enough. And I think sometimes there is also this sort of misunderstanding, like, yeah, we have to explain it to lay people. People will not get it. Whereas we see in a lot of research that audiences like complexity, and that some newspapers, I will not mention titles here, but they did actually a really good job in using alarming images, or just, well, talking about the IPCC climate reports. They are dense, it's complicated, but still they present that. So I don't think that these kind of messages are just for a selected audience. I think what could be helpful is just to see if, especially in, well, the larger media outlets, that they could try different formats, different narratives to see what works. And obviously there is little room for experimentation if you're the NOS and have to make a daily episode that is trustworthy, especially now. But I still think that these kind of experiments are needed to see if we can find a new common understanding, because at the moment there isn't. So, yeah.
Thanks.
Have you tried to track the effect that these kinds of initiatives have on the population, at least on the small scale, like an individual?
We're still doing this on a very small scale. That's the honest answer. I know that in the US there is a project on speculative journalism that was tested with a larger audience, but well-educated audiences. They loved it. So this is still in a very experimental phase. So yeah, the short answer would be no.
Thanks. Oh yeah, a follow-up question.
How far into speculation are you are you willing to go with this kind of journalism?
And why is that relevant? Can you?
I mean, well, I think there's a separation in between giving people a new narrative and giving people incorrect ideas that are just not feasible.
No, that's a really good one, and obviously it's a very delicate balance, especially now. Trust is everything in journalism, so I'm not proclaiming that everyone should go into speculative journalism now. We as researchers are just trying to explore what we could learn from that, what we know, for instance, from the book of The Ministry of the Future. Maybe some of you have read it. It's a very captivating book that is, in a way, a lot of reviewers mention, well, it's not that far-fetched. And what it does, it helps to animate the discussion on the political and sociological structures. And it's a very hopeful book. And I think these kind of discussions can definitely help us to get out of the climate grief. You were just mentioning you're trying new techniques with your students, because we see as well that our students can be pretty depressed. So we also need to offer them alternatives to be hopeful again. Whether this is the answer, I don't know, but at least we're trying.
Thanks. Do we have time? Actually, we're out of time. So thank you very much, Danielle. One more round of applause. So now that we understand a little bit better where our collective climate depression comes from, or how the media filters in on that process, where does that leave us? Can individuals still make a difference? Our next speaker believes so. He investigates how individuals can make a difference in bringing about collective action towards climate resilience. He is a PhD student here at the Faculty of Technology, Policy and Management. Please give a round of applause for Alessandro Taberna.
Is there the point as well? The point or not, right? No, it's okay, okay. Okay, well, happy to be here. It was nice to hear that someone was looking for some hope. Maybe we can give a little bit, but not too much. I don't know if you are more depressed or less depressed after this first talk. This would be an interesting question. But what I would like to say here is that, of course, in general, it's very easy to get depressed. Like, we look at the news that we were saying. These are like example of this summer. There were like very high temperature. They said that June was the hottest month on record, and they say the temperature were expected, higher extreme temperatures were expected to persist through July. And then what happened is that July was indeed the hottest month of record. So of course things didn't get any better. And now what science is telling us is that we have a kind of fairly robust relationship of temperature increase and frequency of extreme climate events. So of course, it's very important to try to understand how we can moderate our temperature. New estimates show that even like we were underestimated the damages of extreme climate disaster. These recent studies published this year actually show that climate crisis is costing 16 million an hour. So you can just make the math and see how much does it mean in 1 year. So of course it's very important to understand what we can expect from temperature increase, because indeed it would be a very good proxy of how many damages and disaster we would expect. So that's why I would like to talk about what do we know and what we don't know about kind of temperature projection. Because what climate scientists do, they make models, they try to put reality into mathematical equation, which then is used to make some prediction. But of course, these models have flaws, limitation, and so on. So what I would like to say here is like this graph. It shows the past temperature change compared to the past. And this is kind of future projection. So what I would like to show here is that there is, of course, these bars present the uncertainty, so the part we cannot really predict, the parts that we are not certain about. I would like to say there is a part which is internal variability, so they are parts that we do not really fully understand of the climate systems. For instance, El Niño, La Niña, these kind of climate cyclic events that create, that change the temperature, but we cannot really understand why, and this is orange bar. Then there are things like modeling limitations. So there are things that it's very difficult to put into models and we do not fully understand, like cloud formation. Temperature increase predicts to have less clouds. Less clouds means more direct sunlight, so more temperature increase. But there is also some studies that show that a different type of cloud, which is actually very dense, might be created. So this actually is reflecting the sun. So these kind of effects are very uncertain and creates this blue bar. And then, of course, there is the human factor. So the action we make. We don't know what we're going to do now, what we're going to do in the future that will work in terms of CO2 emission, that will work against climate. What is important to show here is that now, you can see at the time point of now, most of the uncertainty is based on this climate fact, this fact that we don't know, modeling limitation, because indeed there are limits that we face now. But in the future, the highest uncertainty in part, it depends on the human factor. So actually what we do, it's really gonna matter on this. A part that is not even included in this graph is tipping points. So I will now talk briefly about tipping points. It's like when a very small change causes a large long-term effect. If you look at this example, like you are cycling on top of the hill, you give a little push of pedal and you advance a little bit. You give another push of pedal and you advance a little bit. The same little push of pedal at a certain point will bring you down the hill. And so basically, the same small change you were doing before brings you to a completely different state that indeed has basically a major effect on your position. Another important thing to see is that, of course, this is very difficult to reverse, because if you give the same push of pedal back, you will not go back up the hill. You will need much more strength to go up. So in case you didn't want to go down, maybe you should have avoided that little last pedal. This is, of course, also true in climate natural system. For instance, here is an example of a forest which has an insufficient number of healthy trees. It rains, there is water, is a kind of cycle of healthy forest. But if the forest gets too dry, because indeed, for instance, temperature increases too much, maybe there is a fire. The fire burns too many trees. The forest is not able to kind of create the same water evaporation as before. And it creates the water even more drier and even more fire until the thing is destroyed. So let's say there is maybe a certain amount of tree, and even cutting small tree at certain point might change one cycle to the other. So there are many, so tipping points are usually seen as a negative thing. There are, for instance, the Amazon tipping point. Like everyone, like some climate scientists are worried that the Amazon will become from an absorber to an emitter of CO2, for instance, keeping deforestation and adding cattle and other intensive agricultural practice. There is the Antarctica ice sheet. Maybe they will melt at a certain point. They will completely collapse, causing a huge increase in sea level rise. So, of course, this is one thing we have to really care about. But basically, tipping points are a double-edged sword, because they have a strong change, strong power that can be negative but can also be positive. What I would like to talk here in the conclusion of this talk is indeed social tipping point that basically are defined as small nudge that can bring a very fast and big social change. For instance, helping the climate discourse. Here is an example of a study where they had groups of people and they plant in these groups a number of activists. So in this group there was a dominant idea. They plant a number of activists with a different idea, and they measure when the idea from the activist was becoming dominant or not. What they demonstrate is that almost every time that the number of activists in a group was less than 25%, the idea didn't make it. They just failed, and the dominant idea remained the same. When the amount of activists was about or more 25%, most of the time the idea was becoming a success. So we usually think that majority brings change, but this is not actually true. Sometimes a certain critical mass, in this case 25%, can really make fast change happening. Another important point of this is that every person counts. Like, imagine you were maybe from 21, so sometimes just planting one more activist would make a huge difference in probability in terms of failure or change of this whole process. And then, of course, this change goes under the hood, because we don't really see them happening. We don't know if we have a certain amount of activists, we don't know that adding one more will just change our idea from failure to success. And there is also the example of the Black Lives Matter movement. You can see these are like the Twitter reaction over time to the killing of, by the police of Black Americans. And yeah, you can see the reaction kind of at some peaks, kind of stable, then came back down. But more and more people were starting to follow the movement. until there was the kill of George Floyd, and in that case, the critical mass was sufficient to kind of spiral all the social change all over the internet, and the movement became massive at the measure we see today. This is, of course, also true for climate-related actions. Germany in the 90s had 2,000 solar panels home, and after trying to incentivize them, it didn't work. They sampled certain people in the neighborhood, trying to convince the neighbors of those to do that, and now they, for instance, they are leader in solar panels with more than 500,000 houses. So this is basically a tool that we could use to foster and bring actually positive change in our continuous fight with climate change. And I would like maybe to leave.
Thank you, Alessandro. So Alessandro has a question for the audience, but first I also want to ask you, I saw you nodding with the picture with the bike and also taking a picture in this last. Can you explain what made you make a picture?
Well, I was in a discussion a few weeks ago with somebody here at TU Delft, I won't mention any names, who didn't believe in the relevance of tipping points when it came to climate change. So I figured it would be a good idea to at least use this image to open up that discussion again. So that's a very personal reason. But I very much like this last set of pictures here because this whole, I think we all recognize this dilemma when there's some kind of demonstration planned or some other type of action that you have considered attending, and then it's a Saturday morning and you have a zillion things to do, and you're kind of like, well, it doesn't really matter if I engage myself or not. And I think this is actually a really hopeful way of looking at it, because it can make a difference, and if you feel it's valuable, it may actually be worth not only your time, but also it may actually contribute to something bigger. So
you could be the one tipping over from 24 to 25%.
Together you will create that change. But I find this very encouraging.
Okay, great. So for you it was hopeful. Do others recognize this? Can you raise your hand if it's also hopeful for you? Yeah, I see some. Do you want to explain?
Well, I think it is it gives me some hope, because I see that we don't need. It's not necessary for the whole of humanity to get together for us to make changes happen, but like only for a fourth, which is still a big number, to get together and then make change. I think that's a more reasonable number that can be expected to happen in the future.
It's more feasible. Okay, great. Is there anyone who doesn't feel more hopeful, or feels like maybe there's more needed for them to become hopeful? Who still has concerns? Yeah?
Oh, okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm a bit more in a depressive mood this week, so no. What I think is you can also have like negative social tipping points, which is, for example, when I don't know, anti-LGBTQ movements or oil or financing. Yeah, you know, I think it's not since 2015 or something. We have seen a decline in democratic quality of life, and yeah, I think the mood of a lot of people because of social media and stuff like that. I think it's easy to have a bit of negative social tipping points too. So it's a mixed bag, I would say, but I fundamentally think it's true. So obviously I focus on the positive social tipping points.
In this depressive week, you're trying to stay focused on the positive, but you have some concerns because you also see what happens in our democracy, in the sense that it can also be used for different ends.
Yeah, no. At the end, it does underlie how delicate the situation is, and especially if the adversaries are organizing to oppose, then in a way, I would say the success of social tipping points complicates, and we do live in an environment of extreme polarization. So there might be a case to be made that social tipping points in general will be more difficult as we go on.
Thanks. Do you want to respond to that, Alessandra?
Yeah, no, I think this is definitely true. There is also a lot of build-up anger, I guess. But what has been said is very true. I think what I want to highlight here is not that cannot be positive, negative, even like climate tipping point, there are a lot of negative, as I have mentioned, but it's actually the fact that you can have an impact. So if you believe in something, don't think you don't count, but go, try to engage, try to bring with the people with you, and then maybe you could see some positive results. So that's like kind of my message on this. Of course, there are both positive and negative possibilities.
Yeah, you're saying, yes, it's true, but don't forget about it. You can also use it for the better.
Maybe they don't know, so...
Yeah, exactly. Don't tell them.
Don't tell them.
Just to add very briefly, Frans Timmermans a few weeks ago said on national television in the Netherlands that actually the Green Deal would never have, been introduced if it hadn't been for the school activists doing climate strikes. So I figured that was pretty cool. He actually mentioned Fridays for Future and said without them that this would have never happened. So I thought it was it's good to have that said out loud, right? Those are very concrete changes, and they may not be enough, or they are not enough, but still, it's worthwhile. And one more thing, I sometimes feel that activists get a very bad deal because they invest a lot of time and energy trying to express themselves, and then people go like, so what's the solution? I'm like, come on, you can't put it all on their shoulders. It's very unfair. And sometimes here that happens too, and I feel that that's not fair. But they're trying to engage people and get the conversation started, and as a way of saying thanks, we go like, all right, so then you solve the problem, and that's just not fair. So
you're saying as an extra motivation to be part of the social tipping points that people should do it and not be made responsible for also solving the crisis.
Get the attention focused on the right topics and to engage politicians and other people with actual power to talk about the right stuff and to and then together find the solutions in the democratic system that we have for that. But if it wouldn't be for people getting together to try to put those topics on the agenda, this would never happen. So it's if you believe in it, it's good to push.
Yeah. So you're saying the social tipping points, to make them even more feasible, make it smaller, just coming together, making agenda is already, you're doing already your job. Yeah, okay, thanks. Anyone wants something to be mentioned on this topic? Everyone sits at the second row.
Just something maybe everyone already realized this, but I actually from this chart realized that for me it doesn't feel like we need to fight against climate change, but we need to fight against other people not wanting to take a movement. And I realized that really irritates me because the solution is probably there if we invest money and time, but people just don't want to.
I understand what you're saying. So you're saying this image illustrates for you that climate change is actually also kind of a battle between people. Yeah? And it makes you angry to realize that not everyone is part of this movement. Do you want to respond to that?
Well, I think, again, it's not really a fight against people, but it's more like, of course, you have to convince people of your idea, you have to sell them your idea. But instead of focusing on fighting against someone, I think it's focusing on bring someone in that maybe has not picked a fight. Like there are many people that are kind of go with the inertia, I think, in this. So I think the most important focus will be try to convince these people first, and maybe indeed try to reach a sort of critical mass. And then there are evidence that the social change can spiral.
Is that?
Yeah, quickly responding to that as well is that activists are also often calling for more justice, right? So it's actually often not against other people that much, but more about justice among people. So
It's maybe a smaller group, but the smaller group is fighting actually for everyone. Yeah. All right. Thanks. A last remark from someone. Something that needs to be said still.
Maybe we have to learn from the also business. You have to see it as a business plan. There are a lot of parties, individuals, consumers, politics, companies. And when you see it as a business plan, you can make it more on all layers. And this is then the layer from the individual, maybe the consumer, and maybe the activist needs more help with to market their idea.
The activist maybe needs some marketing expertise. All right, thank you for that last remark. Then thanks, Alessandro, for your contribution. All right, so this presentation was about how small change somewhere can have big effects somewhere else. And this is exactly the topic of this art project that we have here among us. Please welcome the maker, Letizia Artioli. So Letizia, you've been the artist in residence for Studium Generale, making artworks for these climate grief events. Can you share with us what's the idea behind the artwork that you have made for us today?
Yes. First of all, thank you, everyone. I will actually start from what has been just said. So the installation name is actually "You are a butterfly until you flap your wings." It starts from the axiom and the paradox that we know as if a butterfly flaps the wings in an hemisphere, starting from chaos theory, it can result as a tornado on a larger scale in the opposite hemisphere. So when we are talking about depression, I think I was giving this amorph and very difficult topic of how to handle all this that has been said. So actually what you're going to find in the installation are these two layers that do not communicate between each other, which are on one side the information and the visual very fast layer that we get every day. So you're going to find on the iPads like this disruptive representation of how ideas and intrusive thoughts actually comes up to us. So it has been developed with a neuroscientist that actually was explaining to me like what happens to our brain during a depression phase. So actually we have a lot of blackouts, like blackouts that actually comes like in opposition of all this information that we gather every day that are also quite dichotomic between each other. So on the screens, you will find a series of intrusive thoughts that have been also generated in order to develop questions together with an AI as a flow of consciousness that disrupts what we actually see on social media every day. So we have this dichotomic idea between an idyllic relationship with nature, because what about all the meme? What about all the beautiful creatures? What about the holidays of everybody that we see every day? And all actually the disruptive image that we actually gather. And on the other side, I also would like to invite you to actually test and to personally compose what happens. Yes. So as I said, it's a disruption. It's in the contemporary moment where we are living. So actually you have a visual phase. So on the screens is how the intrusive thoughts happens to us and comes to us. And here, as Freike would say, so by touching the water here and then to touch the water in the other, yes. Whoop. You're gonna compose actually a new sonic landscape, which is made of the recordings of the landscape that has been lost in the last 10 years. So actually, yeah, by keeping it here, you're going to be like a closed circuit because you're actually every day exchanging with the environment molecules. So this is also how we actually work. We are electrical. We have an effect. So while you're touching one, you can start with the other. And what you're listening is actually field recordings of landscape that doesn't exist anymore, but you're actually composing them again and creating a new one. And yeah, I invite you to try. They are 16 tracks that comes from field recordings of the last 10 years from Radio Apori. It's a public domain library, and you're just listening to something that is no more there, but you're bringing it back. Please enjoy.
Thank you so much, Letitia. Is it still on? Is it okay? Okay, okay. So please, when we have the drinks later, please feel invited to try it out yourself and be the composer of these ghost sounds. So now we come to the last, I want to say speaker, but actually facilitator, more like. Because for so far, we've learned that maybe, okay, individuals can make a difference, but even so, also individuals who want to make a change have a hard time imagining a world that is not dependent on fossil fuels. So our last speaker will help us do exactly that. She just obtained her PhD at the Universiteit Utrecht and is actively involved in a European research project called Climate Imaginaries, which aims at exploring and finding new ways in which climate futures are imagined, narrated, and employed. And so today she will do an exercise with you to help us all imagine more positive climate futures. So please welcome Lisette van Beek.
Thank you. So, yeah, I am a researcher, but actually now in this room from now on, I will be a museum curator. So this room looks like a library, right? But actually, let's imagine that you are in the Fossil Fuel Museum.
Idag lever vi inom fossileran. Men nu ska vi resa framåt i tiden, till en klokare tid då vi har lärt oss att leva inom planetens gränser. År 2053 öppnas utställningen Fossil och du är bjuden.
Welcome. 8 years ago, Sweden reached zero emission and left the fossil era behind. What do you recall from the 20th and 30th and all the big changes that we achieved? Welcome into the exhibition. Today we emit almost no greenhouse gases at all. During the fossil era, we caused massive carbon dioxide emissions from everything we did. Driving cars, transports, production of stuff and food, and even this sweater from 2019 is made from oil. This exhibition recalls a period in human history when we used fossil energy and fossil materials. It's amazing how we all came together and turned things around. I don't know if you're old enough to remember all the huge private cars driving around in the city, the SUVs. Despite technical development, emissions still stayed high because they were so heavy and filled with electric devices. It's a really good thing that we shifted towards new types of transport. Maybe you recognize these guys. They are bonus cards for flying. The more people flew, the more bonuses they got. Cheaper flights, shorter lines, and fancier waiting lounges. But more and more young people protested against their parents' unnecessary flying, and soon after there was a shift towards virtual meetings and more climate-friendly travel. Nowadays you can only find cards such as these in private collections and in this exhibition. Stress and fast food were quite common in the 20s. Typically you'd get a chunk of meat made from cow in between two pieces of white bread. Bad for the climate and pretty bad for your health. It's much more clever to eat like we do today, with healthy and tasty protein from plants that get their energy straight from the sun. The sun is the basis of all life on Earth, but climate change has affected our relationship with the sun. In the early 20s, the newspapers' headlines often talked about the lovely summer heat. But towards the end of the 20s, those headlines instead talked about how to cope with the heat. It's a good thing that we transformed our cities to greener places with cooler spots for when the yearly heat wave occurs. Now it's time for you to use your imagination and create your own stories about the road to a fossil-free society. Good luck!
Like she said, without further ado, I would like to invite you to look at the objects that have been created in the Fossil Museum, which are online using this QR code. And in pairs, think of an object that you don't see yet. Think of an object that really represents our fossil culture today. And also think about a story around it of how the object disappeared, actually. Is that clear to everyone? So find your pairs that you discuss your emotions with. I think we'll reconvene in about 5 minutes or so. All right. So I hear that everyone has kind of thought of an object that has been disappeared once it's now 2053. So who would like to share their object and story with the group? Yeah? I don't have a microphone, actually.
Sorry.
We thought about cut-off flowers, just the one where you decorate your house with. It's a bit silly because if you leave the roots on there, it will live for as long as you let it live, and now it will just die in 1 week.
Yeah.
And how did it disappear in 2053?
Actually, didn't think about it, but I can think of a story. So it consumes a lot of water, and they are grown in North Africa right now. And as we all know, it gets a bit drier, and people need that water to actually drink and create food. So they decided that earning money was less important than being able to live. That's when the flowers got really expensive, and people decided to get plants.
Rather than the cut-off flowers. Thanks. Great. Okay, applause, guys.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah?
Not really an object, but advertising.
In general?
Yeah, in general. Yeah.
And tell us, how did this disappear?
By law, we decided it was no longer useful to tempt people to buy stuff that they don't need.
Great. So it was like a moral progress going on. And then as a society, we decided people can decide for themselves. They don't need advertisement. All right. Applause, applause.
Maybe one more to share?
Or 2 or 3. I mean, I want to hear them all.
We don't really have a story yet, but mainly like the nets that you put like fruit or something in, like it's already in a skin. So why would you put a mandarin in a plastic bag? So those kind of things mainly. And I think it disappeared when we realized that you can just use the skin of the mandarin.
We used the fruit in their own skin rather than put them in a separate bag. Yeah, all right. The plastic bag as an icon for the fossil fuel era. I believe it. All right, applause. Anyone else who wants to share their story? Oh, yeah, one more.
We were thinking of the bubble wrap that is inside the cardboard boxes that come with the online orders that arrive at your house.
And how did they disappear?
Yeah, that's a really good question. How it disappeared? I suppose we could. Well,
if anyone has an idea,
does anybody have an idea?
Don't buy online.
Don't buy online.
No, she was saying that it could be popcorn instead.
Popcorn instead of bubble wrap. You also had an idea?
No, I had an idea with more or less corresponds with yours, and that's indeed buying at home and streaming and all those kind of stuff, which costs a lot of energy. And I thought perhaps you could think about something like stream pooling, in which you stream together, and to create more collective points in which you can order things and stuff like that.
I like it. So Netflix and chill, kind of, but but then with a group. Oh, interesting. Tupperware parties with streaming services. Anyone else who wants to share their idea? Now we're getting somewhere.
I'm getting nostalgic because Nespresso pod disappeared.
Oh. And you're also Italian, right? Genetically. And how did the Nespresso cups disappear?
They disappeared because you can't see any plastic anymore in all these individual pindas and the sauces that you go into Jumbo and Albert Heijn and have kilometers of that. They all disappeared together. They all disappeared? Yes.
And what do we have instead?
You have to ask it Wageningen, because probably something growing in shelves.
Something, the coffee growing in the supermarket. Nice, all right, applause. We have one more idea here.
We were thinking no more birthday balloons, because there's more airships now and they need helium, and helium is like very non-renewable, so we have to like manage it well. So no more birthday balloons.
There was just a better, how do you say, business plan for this helium, and rather than the birthday balloons, they found a better use, a more cost-effective use. All right, great, good story. Applause.
Right, thank you all so much for sharing. So the point that we were trying to make with this project, with this kind of exercise, is also that it often seems like there's no other future imaginable, basically, than this kind of capitalist system with eternal growth and so on. So I think you all address those kind of social, economic and cultural issues. So there's basically 2 points I wanted to make also with this exercise, is that when we think about going to a post-fossil future, we always often think about technologies or the objects that we need to get rid of, or technologies that we need to expand, such as solar panels and so on. But actually it also requires social and cultural change. How does it actually happen? So I think Alexander already talked about it could be through social movements. And it's really, really difficult how cultural change also happens with frequent flyer cards, for example. It's not just the plastic, it's what it represents, right? The freedom is associated with going on airplanes on holidays far away. So that's what we try to envision through these objects. What are the social and cultural changes that could happen in society? And the second point is that there's actually lots of ways in which these kind of different futures can be imagined, and in the Climaginaries project we just explored a few of them. This kind of Museum of the Future, I have to give all the credits to my fellow researchers in Lund, actually, because there it was developed. You could also see that it was actually Swedish spoken. Yeah, so basically that's it. Thanks so much for your participation.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Lisette. So that brings us almost to the end of this session. So as a final question for you today, I would like to ask you, with what emotion are you going home? How do you feel now? Can you say that out loud?
Starving.
Starving? So it's time for the drinks. Any other, who shares this? Yeah, some, me included. Any other emotions at this time?
Well, we are all educated and you know what 1.5C means, right? In 2018, I spent 2 nights watching Next Hill, where was the big fire in Monchique in Portugal, with all my luggage ready to leave for the kids. During the day, it was 45 degrees Celsius. That's the moment where I emotionally understood what the average of 1.5 means. It's really huge. So we are still talking data or imagining new products, but we're not living emotionally this climate change. So I hope you guys go with some bad feelings.
Thanks, the importance of bad feelings, very good. I have one more response from at the back.
Thank you. I think I got a bit more cynical. I feel a divide between my personal hopes and fears and also just the general fundamental fears that I have for the climate, that I do not very much believe in progress. Even though I do march the streets and I go out and I that helps me, I don't think fundamentally we will be able to do it.
Right, so also more bad feelings for you. All right, well, personally, I think that's a good thing. Because my personal vision is that if you want to be hopeful someday, truly, that it's also very good to acknowledge all the difficult emotions around this topic. And I'm very happy to hear that some of you felt that space today. Thank you very much. And I want to invite you to the next session, which is on climate anger. We've already talked about it today, or touched on it, the anger about the injustices caused by climate crisis. And on behalf of the organization, I would now like to invite you for a drink and to continue this exchange of ideas. Applause for the speakers, one final one, and yourself.